Chapter 6. Santa discharged all 3 of Cherry's barrels at once, and the recoil of the blast physically forced him backward. The shots tore into the nearest polar bear, shearing skin and flesh from its face, shoulders, and forelegs. It face-planted into the snow, which quickly reddened. Shrieks and wails erupted behind him as the second polar bear launched past him into the elves, scattering them. Santa dove on top of Shelley, and they hit the snow together. When Santa looked up, he saw the polar bear chase a group of elves into the workshop. He swore, pulled Shelley up, and told her to run for the house. She started to protest.
Nick,
Go! Now, Shelley!
He yelled. She cursed, hiked up the bottom of her heavy coat, and plodded back toward their home as fast as the snow permitted her to run. A low growl sounded behind Santa, and he whirled around. The first polar bear, its face and front reduced to exposed bone and ribbons of red flesh, rose from the snow and snarled at him. Santa swore again. Cherry was out of cartridges, and he wasn't about to take on a 10-foot zombified polar bear with nothing but the bowie knife on his belt. He turned and ran toward his house, away from the sounds of the worst Christmas nightmare he could imagine. Snoot couldn't believe his eyes. Despite the considerable amount of alcohol he had consumed, when those polar bears charged forward, he sobered up immediately. Santa had blasted one of them with his shotgun, but the other one tore past him and began thrashing and swiping at the elves who'd crowded around to get a look at Father Time. A flurry of frightened, wailing elves ran toward the workshop door, where Snoot was standing. Worse, the polar bear now followed them. Wide-eyed, Snoot retreated into the workshop and dove for the nearest cover he could find, a pile of rubber chickens. He burrowed deep within the pile and breathed horrified breaths.
This is the damn 21st century! Who the hell asks for rubber chickens for Christmas?
Roars and screams preceded a stampede of frantic footfalls and the lumbering thumps of the monster galloping behind them. Rips, splatters, cries for help, more roars and bellows, more wails and yells. Snoot could hear it all, but from the cover of the rubber chickens he couldn't see any of it. For that he was glad. But cat clichés be damned, curiosity got the better of him, and he shifted a chicken out of the way. Red stained the floor, some of the walls. Pieces and chunks of slain elves lay scattered throughout the expansive space. And in the distance, the polar bear chased more elves around the workshop. Several other elves had courageously, or stupidly, taken up arms against the polar bear. They poked at it and stabbed it with broken broomsticks, plastic samurai swords, a poor choice, screwdrivers, and whatever other sharp objects they could find. Others hit it with hammers and slashed at it with handsaws. The polar bear's white hide reddened with patches of dark blood from their attacks, but its pursuit didn't relent. It carved up some of the elves with its claws. Those who escaped its claws met their fate at its jaws. And those who escaped its jaws got swatted across the room as it thrashed among them. Santa's workshop had transformed into a holiday hellhole. But as long as Snoot stayed where he was, he could survive. Maybe rubber chickens were good for something after all. That was his plan. At least until he saw the polar bear take notice of something in a corner at the far end of the room. Something small, brown, and jingly. Something that had begun to cast a vibrant red glow at the worst possible moment. Rudolph. The remaining elves had taken cover, or disappeared into thin air for all Snoot knew, and now the polar bear had fixed its attention on its new target. If it killed Rudolph, they couldn't steer the damned sleigh. The sleigh. It sat only 10 yards away from him, resting on its original rails. He checked his pockets, found the tablet, but he'd have to drive it himself, from inside the sleigh to get the angle right. He bolted from his hiding place in an explosion of rubber chickens, straight toward the sleigh. As he jumped over shredded elves and skidded across the bloody floor, he tapped the ignition command on the tablet. The moment he reached the sleigh and hopped aboard, it lifted from the ground thanks to the Star of Wonder's propulsion. He shoved a dead elf out of the driver's seat, and the elf fell to the floor with a grotesque smack. Snoot connected the tablet into the dashboard and readied the forward controls. Without any way to steer, he'd only get one shot at this. The polar bear stalked closer toward the helpless Rudolph, who wailed and bleated and huffed. The red light from his nose further enhanced the polar bear's already terrifying appearance the closer it got. Snoot timed his shot, programmed the power to 30%, then upped it to 50 just to be sure he'd have enough speed. He reconsidered.
Not to 50!
He reconsidered.
Definitely 50!
10% was high. He'd planned for a cruising speed of 15 to 20% for the deliveries. 50 would more than do the job. Maybe kill him too.
Star of wonder, star of night,
he muttered. Another 3 steps and the polar bear would line up with where Snoot needed it to be. His foot nudged something in the sleigh cockpit. Silver glinted up at him. His flask! He'd left it in the cockpit earlier. Snoot snatched it into his hand, popped it open and guzzled the last 3 swigs of scotch in one ginormous gulp.
Star with royal beauty bright,
he continued. 2 steps. He lowered his goggles over his eyes. His finger hovered over the tablet, ready to activate the throttle.
Westward leading, elves are screaming.
1 more step, and the trajectory would align. The polar bear took it.
Guide this bitchin' sleigh tonight.
Snoot's head swirled, his throat burned, and his finger tapped the screen. The sleigh sprang forward like an arrow from a bow. Snoot screamed, half from the thrill of the ride, and half from knowing this decision would obviously kill him. The polar bear turned to look at him. Blood dripped from its jaws, claws, and basically everywhere else. It raised its head. Through the haze of the speed, the booze, and the adrenaline spiking in Snoot's body, he adjusted the lift on the sleigh to compensate just in time. The sleigh rammed into the polar bear's head like a full-force sledgehammer into a watermelon. Its head splattered into a monsoon of blood, bone, and brains, and at least half of it smacked Snoot in the face. The far wall of the workshop rushed to meet Snoot. He yelped, rolled to his left, and bailed. As he fell, he heard the tremendous bang of the sleigh colliding with the workshop wall. Then he landed on a pile of red softness. Then another loud bang sounded, the sleigh dropping to the floor. He'd installed a collision-stop failsafe. Apparently, though an undead polar bear's head hadn't managed to set it off, the workshop wall had. But then the real horror emerged. Haunting, high-pitched laughter surrounded. It started as one voice, then it doubled, tripled, multiplied 100 times over. Laughter raked against his eardrums. He died upon impact after bailing from the sleigh. He must have. Because now all he saw was darkness and red, and the softness under his fingers had transformed into the very fires of hell. He hollered as a red face with a wide, gaping mouth tipped toward him from the left. Then another from the right, then one from above him.
Demons!
Their freakish wide eyes focused on everything and nothing at the same time. Yet they also peered deep within his soul. He sank deeper and deeper into soft hellfire while they laughed. The demons all had bright orange noses. Familiar noses. And those faces. Red fur, wide black mouths. They reminded him of something he'd known before he died. The laughing persisted, but his screaming stopped. He blinked.
You've got to be kidding me.
Tickle me Elmos. He landed in a metal cage full of Tickle Me Elmos, and he was sinking deeper into them. Not the fires of hell, not demons, just these godforsaken leftovers undelivered from Christmases past.
Frost me!
He exhaled a shaky sigh and added his laughter to theirs. Maybe he really ought to tone down the drinking after all. Santa barely made it to his front door in time to shut it, and the polar bear rammed into it instead of taking him down. The force of the impact all but wrenched the door from its hinges, but it kept the polar bear out for the time being. It roared and hammered the door with its massive paws, but it didn't come through. Santa whirled around to go for more shells for Cherry, but he found Shelley standing there in the kitchen with an entire box of them wide open and ready to grab. Thank you.
Just kill it already,
she replied. He grabbed 3 shells and broke Cherry open to load her. The polar bear rammed again and broke the door down before Santa could get the shells in place. Shelley swiveled past Santa, and with the yell of a Viking shield maiden, she grabbed the pot of hot cocoa still simmering on the stove and whipped it at the polar bear. Brown liquid seared what remained of the monster's face. and with another roar, it recoiled back out the door and barreled away from the house. Toward the workshop. Santa swore, loaded the last of the 3 shells into Cherry, popped her back into place, and ran out the door after the polar bear. He regretted not grabbing spares, but he couldn't wait. Every wasted second could mean another elf life lost. Bloodied tracks and downed LED lampposts traced the polar bear's path toward the workshop, and a fresh round of shrieks and screams announced its arrival. Santa hustled toward the entrance as fast as he could. When he got there, carnage tainted the floors, walls, and pretty much everything else in the space. But Santa forced himself to ignore all of it. If he didn't stop the polar bear, it would only get worse. A brave elf impaled the polar bear's torso with a metal rod of some sort, but the polar bear just battered the elf away. Then it chomped onto the shoulder of another and flung him across the room. A trio of other elves hacked at its hind legs with a variety of toy-making tools, and the polar bear sent them to similar fates as the 2 prior.
Sweet Scrooge's stockings!
Santa rushed forward, took aim, and unleashed one of Cherry's barrels into the polar bear's back from less than 3 feet away. The blast flayed the fur and flesh from its backside and rear legs, but it didn't go down. Instead, it whirled around to face him, rose to its full 10-foot height, roared, and lifted its blood-stained paw. Santa anchored Cherry's stock into his shoulder, angled her upward, and aimed her 3 barrels directly under the polar bear's bony chin. The polar bear swung its paw. Santa pulled the trigger hard. Chapter 7. Cherry kicked Santa's shoulder, and the 2 other rounds of her payload delivered. The blast sheared up through the polar bear's chin and blew its head clean off. Clean in the sense that it didn't have a head, but unclean in every other way possible. Polar bear brains splattered the ceiling above, and its headless body dropped forward. Santa hopped aside, and it smacked the floor next to him. Its neck pulsed dark red blood onto the workshop floor at Santa's feet.
Unbelievable,
he said, considering the concept of undead reindeer and polar bears, the unspeakable violence they'd created, and the extent of the mess he'd made in dealing with them all within just a few hours' time.
Simply unbelievable.
You can say that again,
Fiddlesticks said from Santa's side. He must have caught a polar bear paw to his face, because 2 long red lacerations streaked through the skin on the right side of his forehead down to his left cheek. Fortunately, the bear had missed his eye. The surviving elves surrounded him, probably about 24 in total. Harpic had survived as well, but his left arm hung out of its socket, and his face had transformed into a perpetual grimace. Pellywiggle lay 10 feet from where Santa stood, very much dead. Wismelda knelt beside him, crying into his chest, quite literally, as he barely even had a chest anymore thanks to the polar bears. Wismelda lifted her head, and as mascara streamed down her cheeks from behind the broken lenses of her snowflake glasses, she wailed.
He was the only man I ever loved.
Quinaglow was dead too. Had to be. Santa's stomach twisted as he recognized the elf's gold pants from earlier that evening, now stained red, but missing Quinaglow's top half. Bibidoo had made it through mostly unscathed from what Santa could see, but gore covered his entire body from head to toe. He held a cordless power drill in one hand and a kid-sized Louisville slugger bat in the other. Both of them dripped with blood as well. A squishing, sucking noise sounded above them. Santa and the elves looked up in time to see several chunks of polar bear head from the ceiling dripping down onto a cart full of previously unsoiled My Little Pony dolls. Bibidoo sighed and tossed his weapons aside.
Well, we can't send those out now. You know what the worst part of this is?
Shabalap asked. He stood among them, leaning on a wooden stick painted to look like a candy cane for support, since the lower half of his leg was contorted at a horrible angle. When no one answered, he continued.
Polar bears are an endangered species.
Fiddlesticks kicked Shabalap's stick away, and Shabalap hit the ground with a thud.
Shut up, you cold-brained moron.
Enough, both of you,
Santa snapped.
Help him up.
Fiddlesticks's eyes narrowed, but he complied, and Bibidoo handed Shabalap his candy cane again.
Now, Listen up. We're in a bad spot. A really bad spot.
Santa pointed at Bibidoo.
I want you to get Gypswitch and bring him back here. Tell him to bring every medical tool he has, and tell him to bring every spare nurse, intern, janitor, anyone he can find with any medical training, from the infirmary right away.
Got it. Bibidoo bolted for the door and headed into the wintry air.
What do we do now?
Harpic asked through gritted teeth. His shoulder was still definitely out of its socket. With the workshop destroyed, a chunk of Santa's workforce dead, and everything in severe disarray, what could they do? Christmas was beyond ruined this year, but getting presents out to families on Christmas morning ranked at the very bottom of his list of priorities at the moment.
Everyone go around and help those who are wounded, Santa said. Put pressure on open wounds. Help whomever you find first. Let Gypswitch and the medical team handle the triage.
A loud clank sounded from the opposite end of the room. The remaining elves recoiled around Santa, and he raised his empty shotgun towards the sound. In the distance, he saw a massive white and red body on the floor. The other polar bear. Beyond that, the sleigh lay below a huge gouge in the workshop's wooden wall. But the sound had originated elsewhere. A dark form rolled out of a cage of red stuffed animals, many of which hummed with laughter. The form, elf-sized, stood up, looked at the sleigh, then he turned towards Santa and the elves. Snoot! He'd survived. He whooped and trotted out of sight for a moment. He returned with one fist raised high and leading a healthy-looking Rudolph by his reins with the other. He shouted across the workshop,
We're still in business, Santa baby.
Santa blinked. Rudolph had somehow survived as well? Perhaps they could still... No, absolutely not. No way could he even think of trying to deliver presents this year. Not while so many of his friends and co-workers lay dead on his workshop floor.
We can still do this, Santa!
As Snoot brought Rudolph over, Rudolph grunted and tried to recoil farther away from the dead polar bear nearest Santa. But Snoot pulled him forward anyway.
See? He's fine. Maybe a little more traumatized than normal, but I can get the sleigh working, no problem, and we can still do this.
Santa tilted his head.
You're joking, right? If you are, it's not funny, Snoot.
Snoot's eyebrows rose.
No way. Not joking. Not at all. I'm dead serious.
He glanced around the workshop.
Well, I'm alive and serious. You know what I mean. We can still do this.
Santa blinked at him. He couldn't believe Snoot was even proposing such a thing.
Look around you. Christmas is ruined. Beyond ruined. Dead elves, blood and gore everywhere, wrecked toys. And even if we wanted to try to do the deliveries, we don't have the timepiece. There's no hope.
Then we'll go get the timepiece back.
Snoot sounded so confident, so sure of himself. Or sure of Santa. Maybe both.
What's stopping us?
Common decency, for one thing. We're not going to abandon our wounded friends and the survivors to clean up the workshop and commit our dead to the afterlife.
Snoot scoffed.
These blustery bastards aren't my friends. You've got a job to do, Santa. You made a commitment to people around the world. You just gonna let that slide?
It's not remotely that simple, Snoot.
Santa wanted to punch him for his lack of respect, but more so for his apathy regarding the gravity of the situation.
We can't just...
Yes, we can.
Snoot shot back.
We have to. No one else will.
Santa started to respond, but Fiddlesticks spoke up.
He's right, Santa, as much as I hate to admit it. You're the only one who can do anything about Christmas. Anyone can clean up a mess, no matter how large or how gruesome. But there's only one Santa Claus.
Nick?
Shelley's voice carried through the silence after Fiddlestick's statement. She'd followed him over to the workshop at some point, and he hadn't realized it until that moment. Santa turned toward her. In spite of all the carnage, she'd remained clean and pristine and as beautiful as ever. Not a hair on her head out of place, not a wrinkle in her blouse. No blood tainted her hands, her clothes, or her face. She shone like the angel atop the Christmas tree in their living room.
I need to show you something.
We'll finish this conversation later.
Santa pointed at Fiddlesticks and Snoot.
Please, start caring for the injured. I'll return shortly.
Santa followed Shelley out of the workshop and into their home. The door still lay flat on the floor, where the undead polar bear had wrenched it from its frame. The hot cocoa she'd flung at the undead polar bear still lingered on the door along with some blood, and Arctic wind howled into their home. He'd have to replace the whole door and its frame, and probably a chunk of the now stained floor, too.
I closed all the doors I could to keep the wind and snow from reaching the rest of the house. That should contain it in the kitchen,
she said.
We'll be all right until you or someone from the workshop can fix it.
That's not a priority with all of the dead and injured elves in the workshop.
Shelley didn't respond. She just headed out of the kitchen and into the basement, and Santa followed. The Christmassy feel of the house deteriorated as they descended the stairwell, replaced by a clean, white, sterile environment more akin to a lab or a kitchen with a modern aesthetic. Santa didn't often venture downstairs. He felt out of place in this aesthetic. But he avoided it more so because Shelley essentially forbade him from her space. Beakers, burners, microscopes, and test tubes adorned the stainless steel tabletops and shelves, along with a variety of other lab equipment Santa couldn't identify. Dark linoleum, or something like it, covered the floor. Shelley waved him over to a belly-high table in the center of the basement and pointed to a microscope.
Look at this.
Santa furrowed his brow.
You know this isn't my area of...
Please, Nick.
He shrugged, nodded, and peered into the microscope. A mass of red-tinged cells covered the slide.
What am I looking at?
Reindeer blood cells.
Why?
He looked up at her.
You'll see. Next slide.
She pulled the slide from the microscope and replaced it with another one.
Have a look.
Santa complied. More red cells. But black and grey spots, abrasions, and even gashes tainted each of those that he could see. He leaned back from the microscope and turned to Shelley.
Pulled that sample from Blitzen's corpse.
She shook her head, pulled the slide and inserted another.
Now look at this one.
The cells on the third slide had a different shape to them, but otherwise they resembled the cells from the second slide in colour, including the decay.
What does it mean?
That last slide came from the polar bear's blood. I got it from our house after I scared it off with the hot cocoa.
She folded her arms and looked at him.
The disease attacks the host on a cellular level. It's perfectly lethal in that it kills the cell's ability to fully function, but we've clearly seen that the hosts are still capable of basic and even advanced motor function. My theory is that anyone or anything that contracts the virus eventually succumbs to it, and probably quickly. That could explain the immediate shift from living to undead in the polar bears, or it could be Father Time messing with time like he does. But I have no idea how it would affect someone like you, or me, or the elves, someone immortal.
Immortality only matters if we don't get killed. Like half of our workforce just now,
Santa reminded her.
That's not my point. Father Time is immortal as well, and he clearly infected the polar bears and probably also the reindeer, but he's not demonstrating any of the symptoms that they did. It's possible the disease doesn't affect us at all. The surest way to tell is to observe the elves who were bitten or harmed by the polar bears.
Santa nodded.
And Crandall. Blitzen bit him well before the polar bears got to any of the others.
Yes, he's our first test case.
Have you ever seen anything like this before?
I've heard of it. I don't remember specifically where, though.
Santa shook his head, and the carnage of the night resurfaced in his memory.
In all my years, I never knew Father Time had this power.
I don't think it's magic as much as it's him using science. And if he gained control of the disease recently, perhaps we can use what we know to track him.
Santa raised his eyebrows at her.
What do you mean, track him?
Shelley blinked at him.
You don't intend to let him ruin your reason for existing, do you?
I don't have much of a choice, Shelley. He decimated our operation. Like I said, Half of our workforce were killed or severely injured. Our workshop is an open sore, our reindeer are dead, and I'm pretty sure Snoot crashed the sleigh into the workshop wall at some point. I don't even know if it can still fly, with or without Rudolph's help. And even if it can fly, we don't have the timepiece anymore. I can't slow time without it. And if I can't slow time, I can't make my deliveries by Christmas morning.
But if the sleigh can fly, then you can find Father Time and get the timepiece back from him. You've got
Shelley glanced at the clock.
about 10 hours before sunrise in Samoa.
Santa shook his head.
He could be anywhere in the world right now.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
I've got other responsibilities as well, like caring for our wounded and
Santa's gut churned at what he was about to say.
incinerating our dead. Especially if you say a virus is involved. And I've got to clean up the workshop and the stable. I can't abandon those responsibilities for a wild Christmas goose chase.
Shelley's eyes widened, and a faint grin teased the corners of her lips, a rare occasion in the last few decades.
What if it wasn't a wild Christmas goose chase? What if we had evidence? Would you do it then?
Santa squinted at her. What she could possibly have that constituted evidence he didn't know, but he had to admire her commitment to Christmas cheer.
Why are you so set on sending me away?
This is your job, Nick. Anyone can help put the workshop back in order, like Fiddlesticks said. But only you can fly the sleigh, and only you have a chance of finding Father Time. If you don't try to find him now, his trail will just get colder, and then where will you be next Christmas, or the Christmas after that? The time to act is now.
Shelley straightened her back.
And besides, he was an outright jackass to me. That alone should be reason enough for you to want to get back at him.
All of those were very good points, but Santa still hesitated.
Shelley.
Especially in light of everything that's happened between us over the last few decades,
She added, and her faint grin vanished. Santa sighed. If she ever did anything wrong, he'd make a point to endlessly bludgeon her with it too.
What evidence do you think you have?
She headed over to a computer against one of the walls and tapped the keyboard. The Christmas ornament screensaver stopped dancing, and the white backdrop of a search engine site appeared. She typed "undead virus location" into the field and hit enter. The search engine produced a few bazillion results, but third from the bottom, a headline read, "Disease outbreak in Haiti baffles scientists." Shelley pointed to it.
Didn't Father Time say he was in the Caribbean recently?
Santa recoiled from the screen. She was right.
And he was wearing summery clothes.
So maybe there's a connection?
It's tenuous.
But it's enough for a start. This article references Admian Labs as leading the charge in studying the disease to create the vaccine.
Santa rubbed his bearded chin.
Perhaps.
You need to find him, Nick. You need to save Christmas. You need this.
She stood and looked straight into his eyes.
And we need this.
Santa exhaled a long breath. Then he nodded. She was right, as usual.
It's at least worth a look. If it turns out to be nothing, I can come back and help with the cleanup.
Shelley grinned and patted his chest, and Santa loved both fleeting seconds of her affection.
You are a brilliant scientist.
He matched her grin. She nodded again.
How else do you think I learned to make such amazing Christmas cookies?
Santa rubbed his overflowing belly.
I could use some evidence of that claim.
Shelley laughed, and Santa loved that too. She nodded toward the basement steps.
Get ready to go, and I'll see what I can do.
Under Santa's direction, a small portion of the surviving elves rallied to his call to action and hauled the Star of Wonder/sleigh combination outside and onto the snow-covered launch platform in front of the workshop. They were going to do this, Santa had decided, and if they succeeded, perhaps he could make everything right once again. The impact with the wall had severely crumpled the sleigh's nose, and red-brown blood from the polar bear's head streaked the hull, but to Snoot's obvious joy, his prototype rocket hadn't sustained any noticeable damage. For Santa's part, He was just glad the sleigh could still fly at all. Amid the ongoing blizzard, Harpic hitched Rudolph to the front while Snoot waited in the passenger side of the cockpit. Cherry rested in the chrome housing Snoot had devised for her, and a box of extra shells sat under the seat. Santa climbed in next to Snoot, wearing an older, rattier coat than his usual one. Without his travelling coat, he'd have to fight through the cold and snow, but he had no choice in the matter. At least it wouldn't cause him any permanent harm. As Snoot ran initial diagnostics, Santa noticed a dark form heading toward them from beyond the light posts. Thanks to the blizzard, at first Santa mistook the figure for a shadow. It moved quickly, smoothly in the night as it advanced toward them. But Santa had long since grown accustomed to the ways of those who moved with great stealth and alacrity. When he caught the faintest glint of something metallic attached to the form, he knew he wasn't imagining things. He squinted into the snowy darkness and pulled Cherry from her sheath, ready to eviscerate whatever horror Father Time had sent his way this time. Chapter 8.
Whoa, easy!
Snoot reached over and pushed Cherry's barrel down.
She's with me.
Santa eyed him, but complied. She? The shadow materialized into a leather-clad woman of superior form. She wore her black hair in a long pixie cut, and 2 subtle elf ears jutted out from between her black locks. A strange-looking crossbow hung at her left side, and the curved black handle of a dagger extended from over her left shoulder. As she approached, Santa noticed faint, smouldering anger in her golden eyes. Her sharp, supermodel-esque facial features and pale skin reminded Santa of an Arctic snowdrift. She stared down at Santa and Rudolph chuffed.
Santa Claus, meet Evalia, my cousin.
Snoot motioned toward her.
She's what the PC gamers of the world would call a dark elf. More Lord of the Rings than Santa's workshop. I asked her to join with us after the debacle with the polar bears. Frankly, I don't feel safe with just you, so she's here to protect me.
Santa turned to Snoot.
This wasn't part of the agreement.
Snoot shrugged.
Ask me if I care. Either she comes along, or you find some other way to get to Haiti.
Santa grimaced. Shelley was not going to like this. He faced Snoot's cousin.
Your name is Evalia?
She nodded.
And you're here to protect Snoot?
She nodded again.
I assume you don't talk much, do you?
She'll talk when she needs to,
Snoot answered for her.
She's the silent brooding type of elf. None of them are known for their oratory skills, but she's a certified badass. Great at killing things and being sneaky. 2 skills we'll probably need at some point.
Santa's eyes narrowed.
If you insist. If our pursuit bears fruit, we'll likely run into resistance along the way, especially given the horrors we've faced thus far.
He paused and couldn't help but look Evalia up and down.
So, I suppose an extra set of elven ears could prove useful.
Who is this?
Shelley's cutting voice wrenched Santa's attention away from Evalia and Snoot. She stood behind him, holding a bulging garment bag on a hanger in one hand and a paper bag in the other. The sight of her left Santa sweating, even amid the blizzard. Santa recalled their shared grins and laughter over the discovery of Haiti's possible connection to their travails. It had been nice, but with Evalia's appearance, Santa had undoubtedly lost all of Shelley's goodwill.
This is Evalia,
he replied, but not too quickly. The last thing he wanted was to indicate that her presence was in any way unusual. Casually, he added,
She's coming with us.
Shelley's eyebrows rose, and the cold wind sent her blonde ponytail into a wild flurry. Then her eyebrows arched down again, and she glowered at Santa. Her voice flattened.
She is?
Santa stepped out of the sleigh and nodded Shelley over to the side. All the while, she alternated between glowering at him and Evalia. Unlike Evalia's smouldering golden eyes, Shelley's burned with ice-blue anger.
Shelley, this is out of my hands. Snoot called her for protection, and he won't come along unless she's there.
Her jaw tensed.
Can't you protect him instead?
You know I can, but he's refusing to cooperate otherwise.
Santa cupped her shoulders with his gloved hands, but she shrank away from him. Santa sighed.
I wish it were different, but it isn't. We have to do this. You said so yourself.
She wasn't on the scene at that point.
Would you rather I don't go at all?
Shelley cringed but replied,
No, you need to go. Just don't make any more stupid mistakes.
Her words stung, but she'd struck true.
Curse that Victoria's Secret catalogue,
Santa thought. He nodded.
I won't. This is strictly Christmas business.
It better be. Otherwise, don't bother coming back.
She held up the garment bag.
Here. I wanted to surprise you, but your new travelling companion sapped my enthusiasm.
Santa furrowed his brow and took it from her.
What is it?
Open it.
He unzipped it and pulled out his travelling coat, now entirely red, except for new fringes of familiar white rabbit fur, which she'd clearly added to the coat.
You dyed my coat red?
Most of it. We had plenty of blood lying around between Crandall, the reindeer and the polar bears. There was no way I could get the blood out of this, and you can't travel in that ratty old thing you're wearing. So I did what I could. It'll match your pants now. Look, I'm sorry if I made it worse, but it was already a lost cause anyway.
Santa's eyebrows rose.
No, actually. Colouring it with blood is gruesome, but I kind of like the look.
He shook it a bit.
It feels heavier too.
I reinforced it. That's why it took so long for me to get it back to you. In addition to it being warm and wind resistant, now it's also water resistant, flame retardant and bulletproof.
Santa gawked at her.
What?
I've had improvements in the works for you since Nixon started bombing Hanoi around Christmas in '72.
It was not fun to fly during that period, that's for sure.
Exactly my reasoning. I figured there was no better time to try it than now.
She shot a glare at Avalia.
Seems like you need all the help you can get.
I do. Thank you.
He pulled his old coat off and slipped the new one on. The weight on his shoulders reminded him of any number of suits of armour he'd worn in centuries past. He grinned at Shelley.
How in the world did you learn to do this?
After a few 100 years of playing house, I got sick of baking all those Christmas cookies, so I figured I'd better get some hobbies. Ballistic armouring is one of them.
Shelley held up her index finger.
One other thing. You're still susceptible to knives, swords and other sharp objects when you're wearing it, so be careful.
Santa nodded. She'd developed into quite the scientist over the years, but he'd never expected anything like this.
Thank you. It's incredible.
Shelley held out the paper bag.
Take these too.
He opened the bag and spotted a myriad of festive colours, frosting, sprinkles and shapes.
I thought you were sick of baking Christmas cookies.
You asked for them, and I want you to do well on your mission.
She gave him a half-hearted smile.
I made enough to share, even with your new addition. So don't eat them all yourself. Your diet's been going well. Don't blow it.
Santa nodded and grinned at her. He hoped she understood the depths of his love for her when he said, "Thank you, Shelley."
Well, don't just stand there.
Shelley shooed him away.
Go! Save Christmas!
I'll try.
Santa smiled at her and boarded the sleigh. Ivalia sat behind him in the second row of seats and Snoot sat next to him. He waved at Shelley and she waved back, as did the surviving elves who'd gathered on the other side of the sleigh. Santa turned to Snoot.
Let's go.
You got it.
Snoot fiddled with the touch-screen dashboard, and the Star of Wonder's engine hummed to life. The sleigh lifted from the ground. Ahead of them, Rudolph lifted from the ground too and just hovered there, his brown legs moving slowly as if he were treading water. His red nose began to glow, a lone beacon battling the darkest of nights.
Ready for steering,
Snoot said. Santa pulled his whip from the inside of the sleigh. He held it in his right hand, gripped Rudolph's reins in his left, lifted the whip above his head and cracked it just shy of Rudolph's brown rump on the right side. The whippings were never applied to the reindeer directly, just as indicators to help guide them while in the air. He pulled the reins to the left at the same time, and Rudolph responded as he'd been trained. He turned left, into the blowing blizzard, with bright pink light from his red nose leading the way. Snoot increased the throttle to 3%, and the sleigh moved forward and curved left with Rudolph in the lead. A chorus of cheers and shouts and claps sounded from below as they turned south along the 72nd West Meridian toward Haiti, and Santa waved down at them. Snoot increased the throttle to a healthy 15%, and the sleigh pulsed forward, leaving the cold, dark terrain of the North Pole behind them. They picked up substantial speed as Snoot increased the throttle to 20%, but Rudolph kept pace with no indication of strain. Before long, they'd travelled beyond the edges of the blizzard, ascended to several thousand feet, and cruised through the cloudy northern skies of North America. By Snoot's calculations, they'd reach Haiti within 2 hours, assuming nothing went wrong along the way. Something poked Santa's shoulder as they flew. He glanced back to see Evalia's fine elven features. She pointed ahead of him and to the southwest under the thick clouds that blanketed the sky. He squinted and made out a flock of dark birds flying a good distance from them and below them. He said to her,
"Probably just puffins or some other Arctic bird."
She frowned and pointed to several spots in the distance. Santa spotted more flocks where she'd pointed, black, white, and grey birds flying toward the sleigh.
Do you usually see this many birds when you fly this thing?
Snoot asked.
No.
A sick feeling stirred in Santa's gut.
More of Father Time's tricks.
The twisting in Santa's stomach intensified when he realized the birds were not only flying closer, they had actually surrounded the sleigh.
I don't like this. I don't like it at all,
Snoot said. From ahead, Rudolph turned his head back to look at them, and he groaned and huffed. A flock of puffins drew nearer.
They have something around their necks.
Evalia spoke for the first time, but he couldn't place her exotic accent.
Black, looks like plastic, perhaps some kind of metal.
Can you tell what they are?
Snoot asked.
Might be tracking devices used by climate researchers,
Santa suggested. Evalia leaned forward and squinted, but she shook her head.
There's writing on the side of the apparatus, but I can't read it from here. They're moving too erratically.
Santa gawked back at her.
You can see that much detail from here? They've got to be half a mile away.
I'm elven. I can do many things that humans,
She scrutinized Santa.
immortal or otherwise, cannot.
The puffins swooped closer, as did the other flocks of birds. Santa's blood ran cold.
Be prepared to take evasive action if need be, Snoot.
Obviously!
The puffins closed to within 100 yards of the sleigh from the southwest. As Santa studied their movements, 2 of them accidentally collided, and they both exploded into a ball of vivid blue flames. The bang rattled Santa's teeth.
Mad Marley's mittens!
Santa yelled. He jerked Rudolph's reins left and lashed his bullwhip to Rudolph's right several times in quick succession. As Snoot screamed, the sleigh wrenched southeast away from the puffins.
What the frost?
Snoot yelped. Santa shouted,
Lower us!
Snoot tapped the touchscreen a few times, and the sleigh began to drop, but not fast enough. He screeched.
They're still gaining on us. There are too many.
Punch the throttle!
Santa grabbed Cherry from her sheath and pointed her at the flock of puffins in hot pursuit of them.
I'll do what I can from here.
He pointed the barrels at the flock and squeezed the trigger. But a series of violet lights whooshed past him before he could fire. They knifed into about half the flock, and several birds detonated like the first 2. The force of the blue explosions sent the remainder of the flock spiraling away. Evalia, holding her crossbow, turned and gave Santa a solemn nod. Then she faced the back of the sleigh and began firing again. Her crossbow barrel rotated in rapid succession as bolts of violet light zipped toward the next closest flock, a grouping of black and white guillemots. If she could cover the rear, perhaps he could cover the sides and the front. Santa made a note to thank Snoot for including her, despite his initial reservations. As Snoot guided the sleigh's elevation and speed, Santa lined up his shot on a mass of orcs swooping toward the sleigh from the right. He pulled the trigger and fired the first barrel. Cherry kicked his shoulder, and a third of the orcs blew up. He shot again, and took out most of the remaining orcs, and several others caught fire and exploded shortly after.
Santa! Left side!
Snoot yelled. He whirled around and discharged Cherry's remaining barrel into a grouping of guillemots. The spread obliterated almost the entire flock, and the subsequent explosion sent the remaining guillemots careening away from the sleigh.
I need to reload! Cover me!
Santa yelled as he passed the reins to a wide-eyed Snoot. Evalia's crossbow launched violet streaks all around them, blowing birds from the sky like a blue and purple-themed 4th of July celebration, while Santa dug under the seat for the box of shells. His fingers snagged the lip of the box, and he wrenched it from its place of resting.
Steering!
Snoot shouted.
Help me steer!
Santa abandoned his grip on the box of shells and grabbed the reins from Snoot. Rudolph had pointed them directly at an oncoming flock of orcs.
Punch the throttle and drop the lift to 0.
Boss! The clouds!
Do it!
But the battery is...
I said do it!
Snoot complied, and Santa cracked the reins twice to signal Rudolph. He red nosedived, and the sleigh plummeted after him at 30% throttle. Snoot shrieked like a woman, and Santa gripped the edges of the sleigh. The orcs flew right over them. Santa looked up and saw them arc down after the sleigh. But Evalia somehow continued to fire her beaming crossbow with incredible accuracy while she held on to the sleigh. Orcs exploded in fiery blue tones one by one. The ground rushed up to meet them.
Level us out, Snoot!
Santa pulled hard on the reins to redirect Rudolph back up. Snoot tapped and slid his fingers across the screen, and the sleigh leveled out several hundred yards above the ground. Thick seas of snow-covered conifers flowed beneath them as they cruised above the ruddy terrain of northern Canada. The remaining flock of orcs that had pursued them slammed into the trees and terrain below, igniting into blue fireballs. But dozens of birds still followed them, maybe hundreds. In that moment of relative peace, Santa reloaded Cherry, fired all 3 of her barrels at an approaching mass of guillemots, then reloaded and fired again, all while Evalia's crossbow spewed violet blasts at will. She hadn't reloaded even once.
Benefits of being a dark elf,
Santa mused. But even with Evalia's incredible marksmanship, Cherry's tri-barreled barrages, and Snoot and Rudolph's nifty evasive maneuvers, their luck wouldn't last. They couldn't hope to destroy all the birds pursuing them, so they'd have to escape. Santa fired another shell at some puffins, then pointed into the distance.
We're heading for that pocket of clouds.
Boss, the battery's hilariously low. We haven't been charging this whole time because of the clouds. We need more starlight.
Santa cursed under his breath.
If we don't escape these bird bombs, starlight won't matter.
He unloaded a second blast, and the subsequent bright blue explosion hurled the rest of the puffins in a dozen directions. As Santa broke Cherry open to reload her again, a black and white blur rocketed at his head. He ducked and moved left, and the blur collided with the back seat of the sleigh. Santa, Snoot, and Evalia turned toward it. A puffin sat there, stunned, wobbling, and looking at them. The bomb, strapped to its neck, started beeping. Then it started beeping faster. Chapter 9. Santa leaned away, as did Evalia and Snoot. He tried to shield himself with his arms, hoping Shelley's modifications to his jacket would keep him alive. But if the puffin exploded, its blue blast would probably tear the sleigh apart. Even if Santa somehow survived, he'd just fall to his death anyway. Nothing happened. The puffin somehow hadn't blown up yet, even though all the others had detonated upon impact. Santa snuck a peek under his arm. The puffin squawked, and the beeping stopped. It bobbed its head, looked up at him, and made a trilling noise. Maybe it wouldn't explode after all.
Look out!
Snoot shouted. Santa spun toward the front of the sleigh. As they approached the mass of clouds ahead, 2 flocks, orcs to the left and guillemots to the right, closed in. He reached past Snoot and punched the throttle higher. The percentage indicator on the screen jumped to 50%, and the sleigh lurched forward.
Not to 50!
Snoot yelled. The force pressed Santa back into his seat next to Snoot, who screamed. But the sleigh easily outpaced the swarms of orcs and guillemots. As the flocks turned to pursue them, many of them collided with each other and exploded into plumes of blue fire. and the sleigh left the rest far behind as it disappeared into the clouds. The control panel warbled and flashed red, and the sleigh slowed. Santa looked over the edge. The Christmas lights attached to the sides of the sleigh had almost dimmed to nothing.
Pull up!
Snoot yelled.
We're out of battery! Pull up now!
Santa cursed. He grabbed the flailing reins and yanked them hard. Rudolph's red nose ascended, and the sleigh traced his path upward, higher into the clouds. They had to break through to the starlight or they'd go down. Santa gripped the reins and willed Rudolph higher. He checked the Christmas lights again. They were off entirely. Only Rudolph could save them now. Rudolph pulled and pulled. Even as the Star of Wonder's engine stopped and the panel went dark, Rudolph continued to pull like the loyal reindeer boy he was. Light from his red nose carved up through the clouds, and his body shuddered from the strain. Then they started sinking backward. Rudolph was only a juvenile. He couldn't pull the whole sleigh by himself, especially not straight up. Rudolph grunted and groaned ahead of them. They were going to crash. They'd escaped the bird-splosions, but Father Time had scuttled them anyway. Santa clamped his hands onto the sleigh's dashboard and stared into the thick white water vapor around them. As they fell, the cloud line cracked open, and precious silver starlight shone onto the sleigh. The dashboard flickered to life with 1% charge, and Snoot jerked forward. He fiddled with the controls, righted the sleigh, and barely got it hovering in time to save them from crashing to the earth. As the sleigh fully righted itself, not moving except to hover in place and stay airborne, Santa looked over at Snoot and they both whooped. A grumbling chirp sounded behind them, and they turned back. The puffin still sat there next to Evalia in the back seat of the sleigh, glancing between them with its orange and blue beak open. The bomb on its neck was secured with a woven neon green strap that looked like one of those paracord bracelets that survivalists and douchebag powerlifters wore. For a long moment, all they did was stare at each other.
Is it going to explode?
Evalia finally asked. Santa shrugged.
I'm not sure. If he hasn't already, perhaps it won't.
Pass it over to me!
Snoot extended his arms toward the puffin, but they weren't long enough to reach it from the front seat. Evalia shuddered and carefully grabbed the bird under its wings with 2 hands. The puffin fluttered its wings and honked. It nipped at her hands as she passed it to Snoot, but it calmed once he started to stroke its head. Santa blinked at Evalia.
I thought elves were supposed to like animals.
That's regular elves,
Snoot said.
Dark elves are more likely to kill them than to care for them. They're more about elemental stuff. Rocks, crystals, trees, energy. Natural crap. Bunch of weirdos, if you ask me. But don't mind her. She's more normal than the rest of them.
Santa glanced at Evalia again and caught another smouldering stare. He looked away just as quickly. More normal?
It looks like the device malfunctioned,
Snoot said.
There's a fail-safe mechanism on it that could detonate it, but as long as that doesn't get activated, I think we're safe.
Throw it out,
Evalia said, her voice flat but firm.
What? No!
Snoot pulled the puffin farther away from her, close to his chest, and it trilled again.
If it explodes in here, we're all dead.
Evalia's tone reminded Santa of Shelley.
Perhaps she's right, Snoot.
It's awfully dangerous to keep it here.
It's a he, and his name is Puffsworth. I have just decided.
Name it Professor Puffsworth for all I care, but get rid of it. I don't want it anywhere near me.
Snoot stroked the puffin's head with his stubby fingers.
I would, but you blew up his entire flock, so...
More than that?
Evalia muttered.
So, we're keeping him until we can find him a nice home.
Snoot nodded.
And you're damned right I'm going to call him Professor Puffsworth. Obviously.
Evalia fixed her cold stare on Santa, and he shrugged again.
You're certain it won't explode?
Positive. I'm a rocket scientist, after all.
Puffsworth nuzzled his orange and blue beak into Snoot's beard, and Snoot chuckled. Santa couldn't help but smile.
Fine, but you look out for him, Snoot. If he threatens to blow, he's gone.
He won't. He wouldn't do that to us.
Snoot rubbed Puffsworth's neck under his beak, just above the neon green strap.
Would you, my widow, Professor Puffsworth?
Evalia moaned.
I think I'm going to be sick.
The puffin trilled with contentment. Date, Christmas Eve. Location, Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Local time, 2:18 a.m. 8 hours until Samoan Apian delivery begins. 2 hours later, they arrived in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Thanks to an 18-hour time difference between Samoan time and Haitian time, early morning darkness still covered the land. Santa landed Rudolph and the sleigh in the shadows behind the keyhole-shaped Admian Laboratories building, the place Shelley had discovered online when researching Haiti and the disease. He pulled a carrot from a bag Shelley had packed for Rudolph and fed it to him.
Stay put, Rudolph. We'll be back soon.
Rudolph snorted and continued munching on his carrot. Multiple lights blazed yellow-orange, illuminating the laboratory entrance. Several cars and at least as many bicycles occupied the parking lot adjacent to the building. Santa found it strange, to say the least, for it being 2 a.m. As they approached the entrance, Santa noticed Evalia's crossbow still in her arms, and Puffsworth sat in Snoot's. He stopped them.
I really don't think it's necessary to bring those inside.
Snoot and Evalia glanced at each other and started talking simultaneously. Santa held up his hand.
One at a time.
I never go anywhere without Doom's Blossom.
Evalia held up her crossbow.
And I intend to never go anywhere without Professor Puffsworth.
Snoot said.
Ever again.
I'm leaving Cherry in the sleigh,
Santa said.
You do well to leave your accoutrement behind as well. I don't want to scare the workers inside. We may not get the answers we need.
Snoot squinted at him.
I don't think a puffin's gonna scare a bunch of scientists.
A puffin with a bomb strapped to its neck might.
How would they know it's a bomb?
They're scientists. Look, leave him here. He can keep Rudolph company.
As if he understood, Puffsworth leaped from Snoot's arms and glided over to the sleigh. He landed on the dashboard and cooed at Rudolph, who responded with a chuff. Snoot rolled his eyes.
It's like watching a live-action Disney movie.
Evalia unfastened the straps that kept her leather coat closed, revealing a set of black armor with gold trim on her torso, low cut and with ample cleavage. She pulled the coat off and tossed it into the sleigh. Then she slung her dagger back onto her shoulder. Santa averted his eyes immediately. Based on the dozens of battles he'd been in back in the Middle Ages, Santa knew just how impractical her armor really was, particularly where her cleavage came into play.
Don't you think you ought to keep that coat on?
Why are you not looking at me?
The sun's in my eyes.
It's night time.
Glare, then, from the lights. It's reflecting off something.
Santa swallowed.
Don't you think you should wear that coat? We might encounter trouble.
It's 70 degrees out here. Hotter than necessary for me to wear this.
Hotter indeed.
Santa swallowed again. Evalia stepped in front of him in all her shapely elven glory, holding her crossbow.
Are you unwell?
Santa clenched his eyes shut.
Shelley's going to kill me.
He pried his eyes open and forced a smile, careful to look at her golden eyes, and no lower.
I'm just concerned for your well-being.
She waved her hand, then raised her crossbow.
I'll be fine. I have this.
Santa refocused on Evalia.
The crossbow?
Doom's Blossom.
She grinned at him.
As I said.
He strained to keep his gaze on her face.
I don't think it's wise to bring a crossbow into a laboratory.
You just said you wanted me to be safe.
I do. I just don't want to scare anyone.
Santa gave in and glanced down at her chest, but Shelley's voice sounded in his head, and he snapped his gaze back up to her eyes. Her eyes narrowed at him, and she held up the crossbow.
I'm taking her with me.
Then wait outside the door until I clear it with whoever's in charge, okay? I'll say you're my bodyguard.
He looked her over. Black leather, elf ears, cleavage and all.
Or something.
She nodded.
Very well.
If she's not going in, neither am I.
Snoot had taken a seat near the sleigh. and he'd begun tinkering with the Christmas lights attached to its side.
I've got work to do anyway.
Rather than argue with him, Santa held his tongue and headed for the entrance. The glass sliding doors whooshed open and he stepped inside. Pristine white walls and faux marble floors gave the lobby a clean look. Clear plastic swooshes were mounted to the front of the reception desk, and the touchscreen monitors on the walls displaying Admian's sleek logo suggested technical superiority. Even so, 3 of the fluorescent lights mounted to the ceiling had burned out. It didn't matter, since plenty of lighting still glowed overhead, but Santa found it odd that a company keen on conveying such a polished look would ignore something like that. A dark-skinned man in a grey suit and wearing a bowler hat sat on a black leather sofa against the wall to Santa's left. He held a novel entitled The Ghost Mine in front of his face, obscuring Santa's view of him. Why he'd decided to sit in the lobby of a laboratory and read a book at 2 a.m., Santa didn't know, but perhaps Haitians did things differently. 2 sealed double doors marked laboratories on the far end of the lobby required proper credentials to get through. Santa wouldn't get inside without a tour guide of some sort. Given the number of cars and bicycles in the parking lot, and the open lobby doors and lights on, he figured this must be a 24-hour operation, so someone was sure to be along shortly. He dinged the reception bell and waited. After waiting a hardy moment, he dinged it again. Time, after all, was running out. Santa noticed an entryway leading away from the reception area. When still no one came, he headed toward it. Perhaps the receptionist hadn't heard the bell, loud though it was, if anyone was even working so early in the morning to begin with. Santa rounded the reception counter and entered the doorway. It led to a small break room with only one occupant standing at the counter near the coffee maker, her back to him. With a carafe in hand, she poured brown liquid into a disposable paper cup.
Excuse me, miss?
Santa asked. She didn't respond. Didn't even move. Santa stepped forward, his footsteps heavier than he would have liked. A year had passed since he delivered any gifts, and therefore he hadn't moved stealthily for just as long.
Miss?
She still didn't move. Then he noticed the coffee wasn't flowing. It was stuck in place. Like the coffee, the woman wasn't moving either, not even breathing. Santa swallowed and stepped next to her. He craned his neck to look in her eyes and found them vacant and brown, set into her equally brown face. She was frozen in time. Chapter 10. Santa turned back and headed into the lobby, straight for the suit man seated on the sofa. He peered over the book and saw his face, which was as motionless as chiseled brown stone.
They're all frozen.
He hurried back outside and summoned Evalia and Snoot.
We're in the right place. Everyone inside is frozen in time.
They followed him to the entrance and Snoot handed Santa his shotgun.
Thank you.
Santa eyed him.
You didn't bring a weapon?
She's here to protect me. Plus,
Snoot grabbed the collar of his shirt and pulled it down, revealing a tattoo of a laboratory test beaker inside a red heart on his left shoulder.
I'm a scientist, not a fighter. And a lover, too. But that's beside the point.
Here.
Evalia drew a weapon from her back, a curved dagger as long as Snoot's arm, and handed it to him, handle first.
This should suffice.
Snoot held it up, and its blue blade glinted in the yellow-orange lights.
I've never seen metal like this before. What is it?
It's made of blood ore. It hails from a faraway land, and it is renowned for its ability to carve through even the hardened scales of Sobex.
Santa tilted his head.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but if it's all the same to you, I'd rather not. I wouldn't know how to use it anyway.
Snoot handed it back to her.
I'll just stay close by if something goes wrong.
You're a rocket scientist and you can't figure out how to use a dagger?
Santa squinted at him.
You just swing it at whatever's coming at you.
My hands are delicate flowers. If I make even one mistake with that thing, I might lose a petal. And then I can kiss my deals with NASA and SpaceX goodbye.
Snoot shook his head and wobbled the dagger in his hands.
No thanks.
She frowned at him, but took it back and sheathed it.
Very well. But let it be known that I tried to prepare you to face your death as a man.
The whole reason I reached out to you was so you'd prevent me from dying in the first place, like a man or otherwise. Not for you to equip me to protect myself.
Ivalia glowered at him.
I wouldn't be here at all if it weren't out of respect for your mother's memory.
All right, both of you, Santa said. We're short on time. Let's get inside and see what we can find.
Puffsworth landed on Snoot's shoulder and squawked as they headed toward the entrance. Santa pointed at him.
He'll have to stay here, Snoot.
Snoot scoffed.
Like hell he will. I'm not leaving him out here if Father Time might be lurking nearby. Where I go, he goes.
In the interest of avoiding yet another argument, Santa didn't press the issue. Instead, he rolled his eyes and stepped into range of the door's motion sensor. They passed through the lobby to the set of sealed double doors. Snoot set to work on the adjacent control panel, while Ivalia studied the man with the copy of the ghost mine at close range. The doors whooshed open a moment later, and Snoot stood beside the panel, arms folded. He sneered up at Ivalia.
This is why I'm here. You two do the die-hard stuff. I'll handle the tech.
Puffsworth trilled and bobbed his head. Ivalia didn't argue, and Santa led them into the double doors. The labs splayed outward from a centralized room in a clockwork shape, with the lobby entrance serving as 6 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, a window displayed a containment tank teeming with brightly colored marine life swimming through aquamarine waters. At numbers 1 through 5 and 7 through 11, dozens of time-suspended scientists in white lab coats occupied equal-sized rooms, each space white and clean and encased in clear glass walls. Santa huffed. Fitting that Father Time would utilize a clock-shaped laboratory. They headed into the center of the clock until they stood atop Admian's logo emblazoned on the linoleum floor. Snoot rubbed his hands together and read the placards mounted next to each of the lab doors.
Cryptozoology, alchemy, nanotechnology, neogenetics, geological manipulation. And that's just one side? This is a science geek's wet dream.
Santa read the placard for door number 8.
Time distortion. Let's start here.
And look what's next door.
Snoot nodded to number 9.
Necromancology.
Ivalia shook her head.
That's not a real thing. It's supposed to be called necromancy.
Not when it deals with science. Then you have to add ology to the end of it.
Snoot grinned.
Besides, it's on a placard next to the lab door. It must be a real discipline now.
It lines up with the undead polar bears and reindeer. We'll look in both.
What's in that tank?
Ivalia nodded toward the aquamarine tank at 12 o'clock. With a gasp, Snoot skittered toward it and pressed his face against the glass.
The most awesome thing ever? That's what?
Ivalia headed over next, and Santa followed behind her. He wished he'd gone first, because her leather pants proved equally as distracting as her cleavage. When Santa reached the tank, he regretted coming over at all. Amid a variety of tropical fish, coral, and anemones swam 5 beautiful mermaids, a brunette with a purple tail, a redhead with a turquoise tail, a blonde with a bright green tail, one with black hair and a vivid cerulean tail, and one with silver hair and a yellow tail, who looked the same age as the others. They each had 3 small slits on both sides of their necks. Gills. And they were all topless. Puffsworth whistled.
Shelley's gonna kill me.
Santa turned away. But he couldn't help but turn back for another look. He needed to learn how to control himself anyway. If he could withstand the sight of 5 gorgeous mermaids, Victoria's Secret catalogues would never bother him again. When the mermaids noticed the trio staring at them, they swam over to the glass and pressed their faces and bodies up against it. In unison, they all smiled and began to point to their left. Santa and Ivalia turned their heads to the right, but Snoot kept staring at the mermaids with his mouth hanging open. The mermaids kept pointing, and Ivalia stepped to the side and smacked a button with a fish on it. Something splashed behind the mermaids, and they zoomed away from the window toward it. Before long, The water reddened with the blood of whatever had dropped into the water. Snoot watched it all, his eyes wide and his mouth still hanging open.
They're going nuts on it. What'd you drop in?
The mermaids in the seas near my homeland only feed on dead flesh. They refuse to harm living creatures and see themselves as caretakers of the oceans and everything in them.
Ivalia nodded toward the control panel.
I'd guess these mermaids have been floating in this tank since before the scientists froze. They are generally ravenous creatures to begin with, so these must be beyond voracious if no one has been feeding them.
The mermaids returned to the glass and resumed their pointing at the control panel.
I've only encountered mermaids once before,
Santa said.
but Ivalia's assessment seems correct. A handful of them consumed a dead whale carcass in a matter of minutes, right before my eyes. Perhaps we should give them more food.
Ivalia nodded and pressed the button again, but nothing happened. She shrugged and tried a second time, but to no avail.
It doesn't seem to be functioning, or the supply of food is out. What should we do?
I'm not sure there's anything we can do.
Let 'em stay against the glass like this.
Snoot gave them a wide smile.
I'm enjoying the view.
Come on, Snoot. We've got work to do.
Santa grabbed him by his shoulder. Puffsworth nipped at Santa's hand, and Santa retracted it.
Hey! Easy!
Santa pointed at Puffsworth.
You're only here because I'm allowing it. Don't forget it.
I could kill him for you now, if you wish.
Ivalia patted the pommel of her dagger.
Don't even think about it.
Snoot snapped.
He's with me.
Either way, we need to move, Snoot. You can ogle the mermaid some other time.
Snoot growled and muttered, but he complied. Ivalia mouthed,
Sorry.
to the mermaids and waved goodbye. The Time Distortion Lab, roughly a 50 by 50 space, housed a variety of fancy-looking tech. Chrome and blinking LED lights covered most of the equipment, which sat on several rows of shelves lining the lab's walls. A large black table with nothing on it occupied the center of the room. A pair of scientists in lab coats stood at opposite ends of the table, one holding a tablet and the other gesturing towards something unseen in the air. A dozen other scientists leaned over nearby workstations covered with various mechanical parts, tablets and notepads scrawled with complex mathematics. They all remained perfectly still, just like everyone else in the building. Once inside, Santa set Snoot to work on the computer atop the glass desk in the corner. Meanwhile, Ivalia shuffled through loose paperwork on a lab table against the back wall, all while holding her crossbow with her other hand.
Can you get in?
Santa asked.
Please. Child's play.
Within moments, Snoot had pulled up the specs for every device in the room.
Hold on a sec.
He tapped a few more keystrokes and turned to face the black table. It began to glow around the edges, and then the air above it ignited with holographic images of the various inventions on the shelves, 3 at a time on a rotation. Snoot snickered and tapped a few more keys, and the images exploded into technical schematics for each of the machines. Puffsworth cooed and flew a victory lap around the perimeter of the room, finally landing again on Snoot's shoulder. Santa folded his arms.
Very impressive, Snoot. But have you discovered anything that can help us find Father Time?
Still searching, but nothing's immediately apparent.
What are all of these things?
Ivalia reached out toward one of the holograms and put her long index finger through a component of one of the machines.
What do they do?
According to the technical readouts I'm seeing, they don't do anything. Looks like they're supposed to manipulate time in various ways, but the science isn't right. Not even theoretically.
Snoot raised an eyebrow.
If I had to guess, either Father Time was holding out on these scientists and they're idiots, or they're just idiots.
Do you see anything that's of value to us?
Santa asked. Snoot shook his head.
Then we move next door.
The necromancology lab adhered to the same layout as the time distortion lab, but instead of machinery on shelves, refrigeration units marked with the telltale biohazard logo housed vials, test tubes, and other containers. Only one scientist occupied that room. She stood in front of one of the refrigeration units, and the unit's soft white glow illuminated her face and long brown hair. She vaguely resembled one of the models from the Victoria's Secret catalogue, so Santa looked away. Snoot pulled up information on the computer in the corner and sent it to the holographic table again. Instead of time distortion machinery, detailed analysis and images of various viruses and bacteria glowed to life.
Admittedly, this isn't my field, but none of these look too friendly.
Do any of them have vaccines or cures?
I can check.
Snoot punched a few commands into the computer, and the entire range of viruses and bacteria showed up as holograms above the table. A few more taps later, about 90% of them turned green, 7% turned yellow, and the remaining 3% turned red.
Green ones have a vaccine and a cure. Yellow only have vaccines. Red ones have neither.
There have to be dozens of diseases represented here. Is there any way you can sort them by symptoms?
Sure, but we're in a necromancology lab, not in virology. Each of these strains efficiently kill their hosts. Or at least the ones without vaccinations and cures do.
Start with those. See what you can discover.
Snoot ruled out option after option, while Evalia waited and Santa tried not to look at her, or at the mermaids in the tank, or at the female scientist in the room with them. 15 agonizing minutes later, Snoot crooned,
Aha!
Puffsworth whistled, mimicking Snoot's proclamation.
You found something?
Evalia stood from where she'd taken a seat on the edge of the hologram table.
I think so. Watch this.
Snoot tapped the enter key. Above the hologram table, a video played. A male scientist with green eyes, blonde hair, and the name Smith on his name tag adjusted the camera lens. Then he backed away, but not far enough. The video only showed him from the waist up to the bottom of his nose.
Greetings. What follows is time-lapsed footage of the effects of NV1225 on a healthy living subject throughout the course of 6 hours.
Smith stepped aside, revealing a chimpanzee in a cage. The chimp bit into a banana and chewed it with its lips smacking.
Such a stereotype.
Snoot shook his head.
Not all monkeys and apes have to be depicted eating bananas.
Puffsworth chirped his approval.
Hush!
Evalia hissed.
Look!
The video progressed rapidly to the 1 hour mark and slowed to real time. The chimp toppled over in the cage, motionless, not even breathing. The video accelerated past the 3 hour mark, then slowed again. The chimp twitched a few times, but it didn't move beyond that. The video sped forward and slowed at a point where the chimp started moving again. It arose slowly to its feet, its shoulders leading, head slumped down, and knuckles dragging on the cage floor. At the 5 hour, 58 minute, 27 second mark, it raised its head and pressed it against the bars of the cage. Drool oozed from its mouth and glistened as the chimp moaned and reached through the bars toward the camera.
So, did it die or not?
Evalia asked.
It could have just been sedated for a few hours and reacted the same way.
As if in response, Smith's head appeared in the frame again.
As you can see, the subject has regained cognitive function on a basic level despite being clinically dead for over 4 hours. The remainder of this video will show the subject's development as the disease further erodes its body.
Smith stepped out of the way, and the time-lapse went hyperspeed. The hours each passed in a matter of seconds, and the chimp tested the cage bars dozens of times, primarily with its face and shoulders, and occasionally with its hands. Eventually, its fur and skin began to peel off as it pressed against the cage. Then it found its own skin and fur on the cage floor and devoured it. Before long, its decaying red-black flesh hung in loose strands from the bones and tendons in its arms and shoulders, and the white of its skull showed where it had scraped against the bars too many times with its face. Santa's stomach soured at the sight. He'd seen it twice before with the polar bears and his reindeer, but that didn't make it any better.
I think that answers your question.
Snoot stuck his tongue out and grimaced.
Want me to turn it off?
Yes.
Evalia replied in a disgusted tone.
Not yet,
Santa regretfully said.
There's more at the end. Let's see it through.
The ticker on the screen had clocked a month, and Smith reappeared, this time with a matching blonde goatee that wasn't there before.
The results aren't yet conclusive, as this was our first trial involving a substantial living organism, but we're hopeful this is the start of something wonderful.
He was talking to someone else with a camera on. Someone behind the camera.
The subject is now classified as undead.
You've made outstanding progress,
A voice replied.
Thank you.
Smith gave a fleeting smile and rubbed his new goatee.
Now, if I may, my colleagues in the time distortion lab have expressed frustration at the designs you provided to them. They don't seem to have received the kind of help you promised. They don't know I'm talking to you about this, and I'd prefer if you didn't say anything to them about it.
Why is he getting so close to that chimpanzee?
Snoot asked.
I wouldn't touch that thing with a 39.5-foot pole.
You have nothing to worry about, Dr. Smith. I assure you, I won't tell them anything.
A pale-skinned man in cargo shorts and a flamboyant tropical shirt stepped into the frame and shoved Smith back toward the cage, directly into the undead chimpanzee's open arms. Smith wailed and hollered, but it was already too late. As the chimp tore into Smith's flesh with what remained of its fingernails and teeth, Snoot and Evalia gasped. But Santa just stared at the man who had pushed Smith. Father Time, unquestionably. He slowly receded out of the frame. Smith's shrieks and yells stopped 10 seconds into the attack, and his reddened body went limp. Then Father Time's wrinkled white face lowered into the frame. He bared a crooked smile.
Looks like you found my recording, Nicholas.
Father Time said.
I knew you would. You're not as dumb as you look.
Santa scowled at him, and the familiar rage returned.
I don't know if you're trying to talk to me right now, but in case you are, I'll remind you this is just a video, it's not a live feed. In any case, you found my connection to Admian, and now you know the origin of the disease that wrecked your holiday cheer. Isn't science wonderful? Anyway, I left you a little surprise. By now, you've noticed all these poor scientists are encased in time, unable to interact with you or do much of anything, really. But they're not gonna stay that way.
Father Time's face moved in and out of focus as he came even closer to the screen.
You see, before I left, I made sure to inject them each with the very same virus that felled your reindeer. It's only a matter of time before they wake up and come chomping at your face. In fact,
Father Time snapped his pruny fingers.
now seems as good a time as any.
The video went black, but Father Time's laughter still sounded throughout the room. The computer behind Snoot beeped with an error message.
What the frost? It says all the data has been corrupted.
Snoot tapped a series of keys, then another, then another. Puffsworth trilled and flapped his wings. Santa headed over.
You can't recover anything?
Nothing. I'm totally locked out.
Computers are overrated anyway.
Evalia said. A moan emanated behind them, low and miserable. They all turned back in time to see the female scientist at the refrigeration unit moving slowly, her shoulders up and head down. Santa clutched Cherry tighter. She raised her head, revealing her once pretty face, now worn with extreme age and decay. Her lips had receded, exposing blackened gums and gnarled yellow teeth. Her eyelids drooped, showing only slits of cloudy blue eyes, and greyed flesh hung loose from her face. She raised her bony hands and lurched toward them. Santa raised Cherry, took quick aim, and blew her head off with one barrel. Red gore spattered the refrigeration units and the walls around her, and she slumped to the floor, dead. Puffsworth squawked and Snoot yelped.
What the frost are you doing?
She was undead!
Santa popped Cherry open and slid in a fresh slug.
I didn't have a choice.
I know that. Not what I meant. Look!
Snoot pointed at the glass that served as the lab's fourth wall. Dozens of other scientists had emerged from the other labs and started toward the necromancology lab.
Your blast attracted them to us!
Santa ground his teeth. Snoot was right. They were about to be overrun. Chapter 11.
Quickly, shut the door!
Santa yelled. Together with Evalia and Snoot, Santa pushed the glass door closed and braced himself against it. A mass of undead scientists slammed into it and the adjacent windows, smacking their decrepit palms and faces against the glass and smearing blood and bits of decayed flesh wherever they touched.
Why aren't we fighting them?
Evalia yelled over the commotion.
Too many!
Santa called back.
They'd overrun us!
Evalia scoffed.
Maybe they'd overrun you. Now we're trapped in here, and it's only a matter of time before they break through.
The door inched open as another wave of undead bodies slammed against it. Puffsworth squawked, and Santa, Snoot, and Evalia shoved back hard. The door closed again.
Doesn't this thing have a lock?
Santa shouted. Snoot swore a slur of profanity.
It was controlled by the computer!
Santa's back ached from the continuous strain, but he kept pushing on the door. There had to be something they could do. He hadn't survived hundreds of years through countless battles to drown in a sea of dead... His eyes widened.
That's it!
What?
Evalia and Snoot asked in unison.
The mermaids!
What?
Evalia and Snoot snapped.
The mermaids are hungry, right? They only eat dead flesh, and there's a veritable feast outside just waiting for them.
You can't be serious.
Snoot grunted. Santa grimaced as another bunch of scientists shoved into the door, cracking it open another inch. The three of them shoved back hard, regaining their lost ground.
It's either that, or we have to fight our way through them.
Even if we could, they're all the way over there.
Snoot pointed to the tank.
And we're trapped in here. With the computers down, we can't just press a button and flood the laboratory. We'd have to break that glass. How are we going to do all of that?
Simple.
Santa gritted his teeth. He shouldn't have to explain this to someone as smart as Snoot.
You climb up into the...
The door pulsed forward again, and the three of them forced it back into place yet again.
As I was saying, you climb up into the ventilation system and drop down in front of the mermaid tank. There's an opening right above the control panel. Then you'll blast your way through the glass with Cherry. Here, pull the trigger hard to discharge all 3 barrels at the same time. You'll shred that glass. Just make sure the mermaids move out of the way first.
Snoot squinted up at him.
Sorry, you lost me at climb up into the ventilation system. Do I look like Bruce Willis to you?
He did actually vaguely resemble Bruce Willis, but Santa didn't bring it up. Instead, he said,
You're our only chance.
Send her!
Snoot pointed at Evalia.
She's thinner than I am.
She's also stronger.
Santa ignored Snoot's glare.
We all know it's true, Snoot. I need her to help me hold the door. When you drop out of the ventilation shaft, try to roll when you hit the floor.
How am I supposed to get up there?
Santa opened his mouth to answer, but the door shoved him forward amid fresh sounds of undead moans and snarls and the putrid stench of decayed flesh. He levelled Cherry at the small opening, dug the stock as tightly into his shoulder as he could one-handed, eased the barrel into the crack between the glass door and the frame, and pulled the trigger to fire 1 barrel. Cherry kicked hard and sheared through the first few scientists near the door, and they dropped in an eruption of rancid blood, bone, and flesh. The door shut in their absence, but other scientists closed in and drove against the door yet again. Puffsworth hooted and flapped his wings.
We can't hold this forever, Snoot!
Santa popped Cherry open, pulled another shell from his pocket, exchanged it for the spent round in her empty barrel, clacked her shut, and extended her towards Snoot.
You're a rocket scientist. Figure it out and save us. And don't shoot your eye out.
Snoot grumbled as he grabbed the heavy shotgun from Santa. Why he had to keep bailing Santa and his damned elves out of tight spots he didn't know. But sure as sugar plum fairies, no one else was going to do it. He ground his teeth, released his pressure on the door, and stepped away. Santa and Evalia held the door in place, for longer than 3 seconds. Good enough. Snoot rushed over to the ventilation opening and stood beneath it. Problem-solving calculations ratcheted through his mind as he scanned the room for solutions. He yanked the computer desk from the corner, computer and all, and hauled it under the vent. Then he snatched a chair and set it atop the desk. He climbed atop the desk, stacked the computer monitor on the seat of the chair, and summited the whole contraption. The ventilation shaft loomed within reach. With 3 quick whacks from Santa's shotgun, he knocked the aluminium grate loose so it hung down from the ceiling. Puffsworth flew into the opening and cooed down to him. As cute as the puffin was, Snoot didn't have time to play games. He urged the shotgun up, past Puffsworth, into the ventilation shaft and slid it ahead. Puffsworth helped by nudging it farther into the shaft with his beak. Snoot tightened the muscles in his legs and sprang off the monitor. His fingers clasped the edge of the shaft, but the computer and the chair crashed to the floor below him.
No choice but to keep going up now.
Puffsworth squawked and flapped his wings, but he moved aside to make room for Snoot. Snoot pulled himself up, all the while cursing himself for replacing his usual workout routine with a Scotch-indulging habit after Twiddledix fired him. Finally in the shaft, he glanced over his shoulder down at Santa and Evalia, who still barricaded the door with their bodies. Except now, a large crack ran through the glass wall adjacent to the door. The scientists were breaking through.
Hurry!
Santa hollered. Snoot faced forward, picked up the shotgun and scraped through the hot, dusty ventilation shaft with Puffsworth hopping behind him. Snoot pulled out his flask, downed a gulp of warm eggnog and muttered,
Come out to the coast. We'll get together. Have a few laughs. Ugh.
It took him another minute to wiggle and writhe his way to the grate in front of the mermaid tank. He peered down at the throng of scientists, groaning, moaning, clawing, and pressing against the glass. By now, the initial crack had spiderwebbed out, and with each bang of a decrepit hand, the glass further fractured. Snoot eased the grate open from the inside until it hung down from 2 adjacent corners. He peered down at the floor. Not a huge drop, about 8 feet or so, but high enough that he'd hurt himself if he landed wrong. Evalia yelled from the necronomicology lab. Then a shout from Santa followed. Snoot didn't have much time.
Roll when you hit the floor,
Santa had said. Easier said than done.
Here goes nothing,
he muttered. With the shotgun in hand, Snoot leaned forward out of the shaft and toppled out. As he fell, he tucked his head and tried to roll, but his back smacked flat on the linoleum floor. A sharp pain ratcheted down his spine, and the air pushed hard from his lungs. The shotgun tumbled to the side. He lay there, wide-eyed, his lungs barren and burning, his throat constricted.
I can't feel my legs, or my arms, or my face, and I can't breathe.
Puffsworth looked down at him from up in the ventilation shaft. Then he hopped out and fluttered down until he landed on Snoot's chest. He pecked at Snoot's beard for a moment, bobbed his head and chirped. Air rushed into Snoot's lungs as a gasp and exhaled out as a wheeze as he forced himself upright. He reached for the shotgun, grabbed it and used it to push himself to his feet. He still couldn't breathe very well, but worse yet, a trio of the undead scientists had started toward him. He recoiled at their deformed faces, bloody with grey, decayed skin. Fascinating, but also horrible, and he certainly didn't want to be anywhere near them. As they hobble-stalked closer, the crash of shattering glass pierced Snoot's eardrums. Puffsworth trilled, the scientists turned, and Snoot whirled his head toward the commotion. The scientists had broken through the glass wall. Santa and Evalia backed away from the glass door, now meaningless with the adjacent wall destroyed. Santa yanked the Bowie knife from his belt, and Evalia tossed him her dagger. In one clean leap, Evalia mounted the holographic tabletop and loosed arrow after violet arrow into the crush of scientists. Meanwhile, Santa stayed on the ground. He swung and stabbed and hacked and carved into the approaching scientists. The familiar yet ancient bloodlust of his days in the Crusades ignited in his veins. It consumed him. He roared and hollered, felling undead scientists left and right. But even with all of his fervor, he couldn't hope to overcome so many foes. A violet arrow knifed through the bald head of a scientist to Santa's left and pinned him to the nearest plaster wall. Santa blinked. The scientist wore a Dallas Cowboys jersey under his lab coat, and the name tag tacked to his lapel read, Jason Joyner, on the top, and Chief Scientist, Neogenetics, on the bottom. The arrow disintegrated, and Chief Scientist Joyner slumped to the floor. Dead. Santa hadn't seen him coming. Evalia had saved him. A female scientist lurched towards Santa next, and he jammed his Bowie knife into her forehead. Snoot heard Santa and Evalia hollering and yelling over in the necronomicology laboratory. He could see Evalia firing off purple arrows while Santa stabbed a scientist in her face with a knife so large it would have made Rambo blush. Snoot's breath caught again, this time in terror. He had to shoot out the tank window, and he had to do it now, regardless of the undead scientist who turned toward him. He centered himself before the turquoise window, raised the shotgun, and jerked back on the trigger with all the strength his elf-sized fingers could muster. The shotgun roared, and Snoot soon found himself lying on his back between the 3 undead scientists and the rest of the horde, while Puffsworth squawked and flapped overhead. Almost all of the other scientists turned toward him, and the shotgun lay 20 feet away. Snoot opened his mouth to swear, but a rush of salt water smacked his face and carried him toward the lobby doors. He caught sight of the water and at least 3 topless mermaids cascading out of the tank's viewing window, which was now just a massive hole of gushing water. Then Snoot's back smacked against something hard and knocked the wind out of him again. The water rose to cover his face and more, and he had to swim to stay above the rising waterline. Something soft and squishy bumped into him, and he turned. A freakish mouth, blackened with decay and missing half of its yellowed teeth, gaped open at him. Strong hands grabbed Snoot's shoulders, and the undead scientist lurched forward to sink what few of his teeth remained into Snoot's face. Snoot got his hands up in time to catch the scientist by his chin and forehead, slowing the mouth's approach. But the scientist had submerged him back under the water, now about 4 feet deep throughout the laboratory. Snoot held what little breath he'd managed to take in and tried to fight back. It was no use. He couldn't twist out of the scientist's grip. Either the scientist would bite him, or he'd drown. Either way, he was dead. Chapter 12. A torrent of blonde hair, pink skin, and bright green scales slammed into the scientist from the side. The scientist's grip released, and Snoot's head bobbed above the surface. He inhaled a desperate breath as Puffsworth chirped and hooted and flew circles around him. A bright green mermaid tail flapped above the waterline, then promptly disappeared below. Another tail, this one blue, wobbled above the water to Snoot's left. Then it too submerged. He grinned. The mermaids were loose, and they were feeding on the undead scientists. And they looked damn good doing it. Even though Santa stood atop the holographic table, the salt water still managed to hit his black boots. The scientists thrashed against the foamy surf, but the mermaids, now loose, carved through them and killed them all, again, in a matter of minutes. Before long, double dead scientists floated face down in the waters while the 5 mermaids greedily tore into their flesh. The sight brought Santa equal parts relief and horror all at once.
He actually did it.
Evalia secured her crossbow to her back.
I had serious doubts.
Santa nodded.
Me too. But he came through.
I suppose we should wait until we are sure the mermaids have finished feeding.
Agreed. I don't want to get between them and their quarry.
She held out her hand toward him with a grin, and his heart rate multiplied. A part of him wanted to accept her offer and take her hand in his. But if he did and Shelley found out, she'd do worse to him than what the mermaids were doing to the scientists' carcasses. Evalia cleared her throat.
My dagger, please?
Oh!
Santa scrambled for it and handed it back to her. She shook the chunks of gore from its blue blade, dipped it into the salt water, and wiped off the rest of the blood into the water. Then she shook it again and sheathed it.
You may want to oil that later on, Santa said. Salt water can really wreck a good blade.
Thank you, but blood ore doesn't rust. It will be fine.
Santa nodded, bent down and cleaned off his bowie knife. He'd sharpen and oil it once he got back to the North Pole. In the meantime, he'd settled for wiping it dry on his coat.
It looks like the mermaids have stopped feasting. We should probably locate Snoot and get out of here.
He led Evalia out of the necromancology lab, and they waded through chest-high water into the center of the laboratories. Santa scanned the area for Snoot, but didn't see any sign of him. He called out, but got no response. His heart rate accelerated again, this time for Snoot. A splash sounded to his right near the lobby door. Snoot emerged from the water, flanked by the mermaid with the silver hair and the red head. Their arms wrapped around his back and his short arms curled behind their necks, his hands resting on their bare shoulders.
Merry Christmas indeed.
Had his smile stretched any wider, his face would have split in two. Puffsworth landed on a coat hook protruding from the wall behind them, whistled, and bobbed his head up and down. Santa raised an eyebrow and focused on Snoot's face instead of on the mermaid's chests.
Where's my shotgun?
The blonde mermaid with a bright green tail popped out of the water 3 feet away from Santa with Cherry in her hand, and she started toward him. She swam in close. Too close for Santa's liking, and he knew far, far too close for Shelley's.
Thank you for freeing us, Santa baby. How could we ever repay you?
She pursed her lips, raised a mischievous eyebrow, and held his shotgun out to him.
Blondes. His weakness.
Well, one of them anyway. He steeled his resolve, swallowed the lump in his throat, and took Cherry from her.
You've done quite enough already. Thank you. We have to get going.
Another mermaid, the one with black hair, emerged from the water and approached Evalia.
Are you sure we can't convince you to stay with us for a little longer?
The brunette showed up when Evalia's left.
We could have so much fun.
Evalia laughed.
As much as these boys would enjoy a show, I must decline.
Come on, Santa baby.
Snoot crooned.
We can spare a few minutes for a little fun.
Santa waded past the blonde and toward Snoot.
No, we really can't. We need to go now. Father Time destroyed the information on the virus. We have to take a new course of action.
We have nothing. No direction. You said yourself that he destroyed our only lead. Might as well enjoy the holiday in style.
I didn't say that. I know where we're going next, and it's a long trip. So we need to go now. Time is ticking away.
Snoot growled and grumbled and sighed. He unhooked his arms from the mermaid's shoulders, but they still helped him keep his head above the water.
We'll catch up later, girls. Santa's being a Grinch.
Come back to us, baby.
The silver-haired mermaid said.
We'll show you a good time.
The redhead said.
I know it, girls.
Snoot leaned over and kissed them both, one at a time. Santa rolled his eyes.
I'll be back when this is all done.
He continued. The mermaids carried him toward the lobby doors as if he were an elf-sized marine prince. Before he left, Snoot turned back to the carnage of dead scientists everywhere, gave them a salute and said,
God rest ye, zombie gentlemen. Oof.
Santa shook his head and followed. Outside the lab, they reunited with Rudolph. Puffsworth flew over, landed next to Rudolph, and made chattering noises, and Rudolph snorted when he saw Santa. Evalia, Snoot, and Santa stripped off their outer layers to allow the warm Haitian air to dry them, while they discussed their next move.
With the Star of Wonder, we can go anywhere in the world,
Snoot said.
But I need you to tell me a destination, or we're not going anywhere.
I have an acquaintance who can help us.
Help us with what? We have no actionable data, no evidence to bring to them, unless you want to haul a dead body with us. And even then, it would take days at minimum to get any substantive analysis of the disease. We've only got...
Snoot checked his watch.
7 hours until Samoan sunrise. I love Christmas as much as the next elf, but we might as well give up.
We're not giving up, and we don't need a body. We've got something better.
What?
Evalia asked. Santa pointed at Puffsworth, who tilted his head, orange beak and all, to the side.
The device around his neck. Any weapons expert worth his tinsel will know what this is and where it came from.
And you know such a weapons expert? I find it hard to believe that any weapons expert would find his way off your naughty list.
I only know one. And while he assuredly isn't on my nice list, he technically isn't on my naughty list either.
Evalia and Snoot squinted at him. Snoot said,
That doesn't make any sense.
You may understand when you meet him.
Santa waved them toward the sleigh.
Come on. We're short on time. Get aboard and dress warm. We're going to Moscow.
Date, Christmas Eve. Location, Moscow, Russia. Local time, 1:03 p.m. 5.5 hours until Samoan/Apian delivery begins.
Comrade General,
A technician named Ivan Kirsanov waved his hand, and General Anatoly Tsipkin headed over to his tracking computer terminal. He growled under his breath and cursed his posting again.
what is it, Comrade Kirsanov?
Kirsanov pointed to the radar screen.
I've detected something small flying toward Kremlin airspace at a rapid speed. A drone? I don't think so, Comrade General. Not that small.
Ivan pulled up a satellite image on a companion monitor to the right.
Resolution is spotty because of the cloud cover over Moscow. But it... maybe I'm imagining things because it's Christmas Eve, but doesn't that look like...
General Tsipkin's eyes widened.
You will not say a word of this to anyone, Comrade Kirsanov, or I will personally ensure that your next posting is in Siberia. Turn off your monitors and go take a lunch break. When you return, you will have forgotten this ever happened. Aye, Comrade General.
Ivan complied, stood, saluted, and then exited the room with appropriate speed given General Tsipkin's threat. General Tsipkin retreated to his office, grabbed the red phone from its cradle on his desk, and listened to the tone. Perhaps this intelligence would regain him favor with the Kremlin. The line clicked and a familiar voice asked,
What is it?
Sir, it appears that...
General Tsipkin swallowed. He couldn't believe he was about to utter these words, but he did it anyway.
Santa Claus is coming to town.
Date, Christmas Eve. Location, Moscow, Russia. Local time, 1:31 p.m. 5 hours until Samoan/Apian delivery begins. The Kremlin, in all its Russian glory, drew nearer as Santa and Snoot maneuvered the sleigh down to the adjacent helipad. He guided Rudolph to land near the black Mi-8 helicopter, parked directly atop the white H painted onto the helipad's green surface. As they landed, Snoot eyed Santa.
Your guy works at the Kremlin?
Santa frowned. This place always brought with it disheartening memories, and for a whole host of reasons. His voice flat, he replied,
You could say that.
Frost me. Color me impressed.
Snoot rubbed his tiny hands together.
Maybe I'll run into someone interested in buying star-powered rocket technology.
The sun shone overhead, bathing them in warm light. It was the first time Santa had even seen the sun since the North Pole had gone seasonally dark in early October. Despite the typical cold winter weather in Moscow, the sunshine felt nice on Santa's face. As they climbed out of the sleigh, a black Mercedes-Benz limousine pulled up near the helipad. A large man, at least a solid foot taller than Santa's 5'7" height, stepped out of the driver's side door and walked around the car's hood. Thanks to his bushy black beard, dark suit, and mammoth frame, he more resembled a gorilla than a man.
You will come with me now.
A thick Russian accent weighted down his English words. He opened the rear passenger side door and motioned toward it with his hand.
Looks like a nutcracker if I ever saw one,
Snoot muttered. Ivalia looked at Santa.
You sure about this?
Santa nodded.
This is about what I expected. We'll be fine.
What about...
She held up her crossbow. Santa looked at the gorilla man.
Put weapons in trunk,
he said. Ivalia nodded and headed over, with Snoot carrying Puffsworth behind her. Santa fed Rudolph another carrot stick.
Stay put, boy. We'll be back soon. I'll try to convince the Russians not to experiment on your glowing nose.
Rudolph snorted and huffed. Snoot grabbed the strand of Christmas lights from the side of the sleigh and wrapped them around his torso. Then he headed toward the Mercedes.
Why are you bringing those?
Santa asked.
Because I've got work to do. I told you this back in Haiti.
Snoot slid into the car with Puffsworth in his arms. The lights seemed to be functioning properly, so Santa chalked it up to Snoot's proclivity toward tinkering. He retrieved Cherry and deposited her and his bowie knife in the trunk next to Ivalia's crossbow and the blood ore dagger. Then he slid into the back of the limousine. Snoot's lights covered the other half of the seat next to him, so Santa had to sit next to Evalia. He would have rather avoided that, but to try to move across the compartment now would be awkward.
Hopefully that thing doesn't blow up on the way to wherever we're going.
Evalia folded her arms and eyed Puffsworth as the Mercedes roared to life and lurched forward.
He won't. He's a good little Professor Puffsworth, aren't you?
Snoot nuzzled the top of Puffsworth's head with his nose, and Puffsworth cooed. Evalia shook her head and looked out the window.
Disgusting.
As Snoot got to work on his lights, Santa caught himself staring at Evalia again, and he forced himself to look away.
What's wrong with you?
She asked. He shook his head without meeting her eyes.
Nothing.
Lots of people stare at me. People of every race. I'm used to it. You don't have to be shy.
As conceited as that sounded, Santa couldn't falter for it.
It's not that. I mean, you're very beautiful, but it's not that.
Then what is it?
Santa glanced at Snoot, who downed the remainder of whatever was in his flask, and said,
Don't bring me into this. I don't care either way.
It's my wife, Shelley,
Santa sighed.
She's mad at me. Actually, she's been mad at me for a long time.
What did you do?
I looked at something I shouldn't have. And now I'm trying not to look at you because I've learned my lesson.
Looking is not anything to get angry about.
Santa bit his lip.
Well, it wasn't just looking. You see, there was this Victoria's Secret catalogue, and...
Whoa!
Snoot released the Christmas lights and held up his hands.
Stop right there. I don't need to hear any more about it.
Who are you to judge? You've got stacks of Playboy magazines lying around your living room.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying I don't need to hear about what you and Mini Claus do in your spare time.
Ignore him.
Evalia said.
Please, continue.
Anyway, Shelley found out, and it's really taken a toll on our marriage ever since.
Santa shook his head and looked down at his feet.
I don't know why I'm telling you this, and I don't even know why I did it in the first place. Shelley far surpasses any of the women in that catalogue.
That's not the point.
Santa turned to look at Evalia for the first time since he'd looked away.
I know that.
I don't think you do. She's mad because you've betrayed her. No amount of comparing her to other women, whether she's superior or not, will fix this.
I'm not saying...
Have you apologized?
Santa blinked.
Well, yes, sort of. Unofficially, I have.
Evalia stared at him with those golden eyes of hers, scrutinizing him.
No, Santa sighed. Not really.
And it's been how long?
A few decades or so.
And I thought I was stubborn. You went a few decades without apologizing for one small incident?
It didn't seem small at the time.
Evalia waved her finger.
Not the point. You know what you need to do. There's no sense in talking about this further.
Santa opened his mouth to say something else, but he held back. Perhaps Evalia was right. But he didn't want to apologize. He shouldn't have to. Marriage was about more than two meaningless words. He'd shown her how sorry he was dozens of times throughout the last few decades. Why wasn't that enough?
Where's the abominable Russian snowman taking us?
Snoot asked.
I'm guessing the Grand Kremlin Palace, but I'm not sure.
Snoot craned his neck and rapped on the glass with his knuckles.
Hey, Drago! Where are we going?
The gorilla man didn't respond. He just kept driving.
Not very talkative, is he?
Snoot faced Santa and Evalia again. Within minutes, they arrived at the Grand Kremlin Palace just as Santa had surmised. The gorilla man opened the limousine door for them, but didn't allow them to take their weapons into the palace. Santa didn't like leaving Cherry behind, but he understood the Russian's caution. Evalia put up more resistance, but she eventually caved when Santa assured her she wouldn't need them. Snoot carried Puffsworth in his arms and kept staring up at the gorilla man, shaking his head. When they stepped inside the palace, however, his attention shifted to the palace's opulent interior, and Santa couldn't blame him. High cathedral-esque ceilings. wooden floors, polished to such a high shine that Santa could see his reflection in them. Lush red carpets, ornate, shimmering chandeliers, and perfectly shaped plaster. And gold. Lots and lots of gold everywhere. Gold on the walls, gold on the ceilings, gold coiling up the pillars, gold accents and furniture and candelabras and accessories, gold, gold, gold. Snoot whistled as he scanned the rooms and halls.
A guy could get used to this kind of luxury.
Puffsworth echoed Snoot's whistle, but high-pitched. They entered a smaller yet equally opulent room, this one tinted green with decor, but still overloaded with gold. Heavy green drapes hung from the windows, embroidered with a paisley pattern. Under them, darker blue-green curtains blocked out the afternoon sun. Green paisley chairs, their pattern comparable to the drapes and with gilded frames, beckoned them to sit. The carpet, a darker shade of green with a regal floral pattern, complemented the drapes. Atop a white fireplace, also trimmed in gold, sat 2 golden candelabras, with a heavily ornamented golden mantel clock between them. A man with receding blonde-grey hair and wearing a dark suit stood before the clock as if admiring it. The Russian flag loomed proudly to his right, a full 3 feet taller than him. A pair of guys dressed like toy soldiers saluted and closed the room's immaculate doors behind them. The man at the clock turned around.
Nicholas, it is good to see you again.
I wish I could say the same, Mr. President.
Santa turned to his companions.
Snoot, Ivalia, I'd like to introduce you to Vladimir Putin, President of Russia.
Chapter 13.
Unbelievable.
Snoot's mouth hung open.
Your weapons expert is Vladimir Putin?
I am honored to know you think of me as such, Nicholas.
The same heavy Russian accent as the gorilla man's weighed down his words. Putin grinned, and the old sense of distrust rekindled in Santa's gut.
I can't ignore your many years in the KGB, Santa replied, no matter how much I'd like to.
Putin's eyes narrowed. He turned to Evalia, eyed her up and down, and extended his hand.
Your name is Evalia, yes?
Evalia blushed, much to Santa's surprise, and placed her gauntlet-covered hand in his.
Yes, I am Evalia. How did you know that?
It is my job to know.
He kissed her hand, but didn't release his grasp on it.
What a rare beauty. You must have many suitors in your country.
Her cheeks further reddened, and she shook her head.
No, actually. I haven't yet found someone with comparable interests and...
She scanned him from top to bottom.
Appetites.
Then perhaps you have met your match?
Putin's tone oozed suggestion. Santa didn't like it one bit.
Mr. President, perhaps we can address the reason for our visit?
Of course.
Putin released Evalia's hand and motioned toward the ornate green chairs. They sat, and Putin leaned back with a smile.
I see you are running a few reindeer short of your legend. But what an interesting engine you have attached to the sleigh. Tell me, what powers it?
Santa opened his mouth to reply, but Snoot spoke first.
It's called the Star of Wonder, and it's powered by starlight. Brand spanking new technology invented, assembled, and retrofitted to the sleigh by yours truly. Name's Doodle Snoot, and I'm a genius.
He extended his small hand, and Putin shook it.
How magnificent. Starlight, you say?
You got that right, Mr. Putin, sir. I'm in talks with NASA, SpaceX, and Amazon to license the technology. I'd love to discuss how I could enhance Russia's space program with you sometime. I don't know if you've ever considered...
We didn't come here to discuss Russia's space program, I'm afraid.
Santa cut in.
We have a much more pressing concern at hand.
Evidently so. I find it interesting that you have come to visit me on Christmas Eve, of all times. I imagine you ought to be preparing for your annual deliveries right about now? I take it something has gone wrong. Why else would you show up on my doorstep?
It's a long story, but suffice it to say we just need some information.
Putin's smile persisted.
It has been decades, Nicholas. You do not call, you do not write, and now you show up expecting my help? Why would I do such a thing?
Because you want to get back into my good graces. Putin's smile shrank. Don't deny it. We both know it's true. Santa leaned back. Besides, you owe me a lot. A long moment of quiet contemplation lingered between them.
Suppose I were to help you.
Putin leaned forward and pressed the tips of his fingers together.
How could I fully return to these good graces you speak of?
For starters, I need you to assess an explosive and the accompanying technology.
Simple.
Putin nodded over Santa's shoulder toward the gorilla man, who now stood near the toy soldiers by the door.
I trust you left it in the car with Boris?
Of course his name would be Boris. No, actually, it's here with us in this room. Putin's eyes widened slightly and a loud scuffle sounded behind Santa. Santa turned back to see Boris storming forward, but a sharp
"Niet!"
from Putin froze him mid-step. He stood so still, almost statue-like, that Santa thought Putin had learned something from Father Time. But then Boris exhaled a long, slow breath.
Discipline, Nicholas.
Putin wagged his finger in the air.
Not something I have always appreciated, but I now see its true benefits on a daily basis.
Puffsworth gave a quick honk and flitted from Snoot's hands up to the golden mantle clock. He perched on top of it.
What is this?
Putin glanced between Puffsworth and Santa.
Say hello to my little friend.
Snoot giggled.
Always wanted to say that. I call him Professor Puffsworth.
You have brought an uncaged puffin into one of Russia's oldest, most sacred structures. If it defecates on the carpet...
He won't. I'm certain of it, Santa said. Almost. Putin's eyebrows rose. The explosive is attached to his neck. I've never seen anything like it, though admittedly I'm not an expert in this field.
But I am. You were right to ask me.
Putin looked at Snoot.
Can you compel him to come to me?
Sure.
Snoot whistled, and Puffsworth swooped down into his arms again. He stood and passed Puffsworth to Putin. Putin held Puffsworth's wings tight against his sides and twisted him around, eyeing various parts of the apparatus secured around his neck with a neon green strap.
I take it you don't want me to just kill him and remove the device.
No!
Snoot blurted and reached out, but he stopped short. He followed it up with,
Mr. President, sir.
Puffsworth squawked and struggled and almost broke free, but Putin corralled him with his hands.
Very well.
Putin shifted his grip to Puffsworth's legs. Puffsworth flapped his wings in a fury, but he couldn't escape Putin's grasp. Meanwhile, Putin reached into his inner suit pocket and removed a fat red pocket knife. Puffsworth saw it and flapped even harder, honking and squawking.
Whoa!
Snoot started forward when the pocket knife came out, but Putin held up his hand and Snoot halted.
What are you doing? I said not to kill him.
Please be calm. I will not harm him.
Putin kept his hand held out.
I need 2 minutes.
He flicked open the pocket knife's corkscrew with his thumb, then the flathead, the blade, and what looked like a thick pinhead. He shifted his grip to better anchor Puffsworth's wings in place. His hand worked the pocket knife's tools quickly and with keen precision. Within 2 minutes he'd released Puffsworth, who flew back to Snoot's open arms, but Putin still held the device in his hand, still connected to its neon green strap.
Here.
He tossed it to Santa.
A gift for you on this Christmas Eve.
Wide-eyed, Santa fumbled the device but managed to catch it instead of dropping it to the floor.
You do realize you just tossed an explosive device at me, right?
You brought it inside without telling me. I would say we are even.
Putin's smile returned.
And anyway, it is a good indication of my feelings for you at the moment.
Santa's eyes narrowed at him.
It is harmless, at least until it is reactivated. It is still an explosive, but it cannot detonate in its current state.
And how do I do that? Or more specifically, how do I not do that?
Simple. There are 2 compression fins on the sides. They are like buttons. You see?
Santa rotated the device in his hands and noted the fins, one on the left and another on the right. He nodded.
Push them in simultaneously, and the device will arm. I modified the fuse to detonate 5 seconds later.
Puffsworth tilted his head and cooed.
Thank you, I guess.
My pleasure.
What can you tell us about it?
It is a much smaller version of a model our military has routinely purchased from China since long before I joined the KGB. The device produces an intense blue explosion capable of destroying almost any substance known to man, including even the hardest metals. It is not to be trifled with.
No kidding.
Snoot muttered.
A few hundred of these almost trifled us straight to the afterlife.
According to the batch number on the bottom, this particular unit was shipped as part of a larger order to a small island northeast of the Bahamas, deep within the Bermuda Triangle.
Snoot gawked at him.
You know all that just from looking at some numbers?
Putin shot an extended grin and a gratuitous wink at Evalia.
I am a man who appreciates attention to detail.
Evalia blushed again and failed to conceal a sheepish smile. In that moment, Santa didn't care they were flirting, at least not as much. Christmas was more important, and he'd just uncovered another puzzle piece, one critical to finding Father Time. The tropical shirt, the shorts and sandals, the lab in Haiti, and now an island in the Bermuda Triangle.
Do you know the name of the island?
It has no given name, only coordinates. I can give those to you as well.
Putin's grin shifted from Evalia to Santa.
For a price.
Santa's eyebrows arched down, and he tucked the explosive into his outer jacket pocket. Puffsworth honked again, no doubt glad to be rid of it.
Didn't I mention that you owed me? And weren't you trying to get back into my good graces?
Putin sighed.
I run the largest country in the world. I do not need to be in your good graces. But I would still like to be. So, I wish to help.
For a price,
Santa repeated. Putin nodded.
For a price.
Which is?
I can think of several things that I want.
Putin eyed Evalia, and she again failed to fend off a smile.
But I am really only interested in one thing.
Here it comes.
What it would be, Santa didn't want to know, especially given their history.
Yes?
I want to come with you.
Santa turned to Snoot, who shrugged. Then he turned back to Putin.
What is it with you people wanting to come with me?
I miss the old days, comrade.
Santa glowered at him.
You know I hate that word.
Putin shrugged.
And besides that, you could certainly use my help.
Santa shook his head.
We've done fine thus far.
From the look of you, and the smell, that does not seem to be the case.
It's actually been pretty rough,
Snoot said.
Undead polar bears and scientists, viruses and necromancology, exploding Arctic birds. Sure drives a guy to drink, if you know what I mean.
Snoot pulled his flask out of his pocket and tapped the side.
You guys are known for vodka around here, right? Think I could get some for the road?
Of course.
Putin shifted his attention to Boris and nodded. Boris walked over to a cart across the room and picked up a crystal decanter full of clear liquid. He brought it over to Snoot, and Snoot held up his flask. When Boris finished filling it, Snoot held up his hand.
You might as well just leave that here.
Boris looked at Putin, who nodded. Then he handed the entire decanter to Snoot, who tilted his head back and took a drink straight from it. Putin turned back to Santa.
As I said, you seem to have your hands full.
You have no idea, Santa wanted to say. But admitting it would strengthen Putin's position. Still, allowing Putin to accompany them could prove far worse than forging their own way.
Plus, if you allow me to assist, I can provide the support of the entire Russian government and military.
Santa shook his head.
Absolutely not. Too many people are already involved, and enough have already died. Father Time can't be stopped by normal people or harmed by normal weapons, if it comes to that. With what we've encountered over the past several hours, it's safe to say he could turn your entire force into an army of undead soldiers. We don't need that.
Putin rubbed his chin.
Very well. Then just I shall accompany you.
Don't you have a country to run? You just emphasized how important you are these days.
Bah,
Putin waved his hand and reclined in his chair again.
they can survive without me for a little while. Besides, it is Christmas Eve. I am entitled to some holiday time.
I think we should bring him along.
Evalia no longer worked to conceal her smile.
I mean, he is a weapons expert. That would have come in handy, especially in some of the spats we've encountered thus far.
I am far more than a weapons expert, my dear.
Putin said.
The KGB trained me extensively. I have a particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like...
How do I know I can trust you?
Santa regretted asking it as soon as it left his mouth. He'd given away that he was considering the request. Even so, Putin did have several useful attributes. Either way, Santa wouldn't get the island's location without bringing him along. He couldn't just fly around the Bermuda Triangle until he found the island. Not enough time for that. Putin's smile returned.
Regardless of our past disagreements, I have never lied to you. I will provide the island's coordinates and accompany you there to help save Christmas. I know it may not seem like it these days, but I still value Christmas highly. And a small part of me wants the redemption you are offering.
Come on, Santa.
Snoot took another slurp from the decanter.
We need him, just like you needed me to get your sleigh off the ground.
Well, what is your decision, old friend?
Putin asked. Santa exhaled a measured sigh, looked at Evalia and Snoot, and then he refocused his gaze on Putin.